Good morning, it's Gary Sly and the Legacy of Handmade Objects. It's Monday, June the 16th. I've been out to the library this morning to get a biography to read and settled down here in the shop for a few minutes to talk with you guys about a couple topics that have been on my mind this week. Busy trying to kind of get through the summer here in Florida and planning for my first needlework retreat coming up on August the 2nd. Also have a knitters, crocheters, and tatters retreat coming up the first Saturday in September. So it's been kind of fun talking to folks and working on resources for that. Couple things that I was interested in just mentioning briefly today. First, the idea of stitching and handwork in general, handcrafts in general, as helpful to us psychologically, emotionally, physically, is something that I've been preaching and talking about for a long time. There's no doubt in my mind that stitching has brought me back from the brink of emotional disaster many times, and at the very least helped kind of calm me down and settle me in when I have long stretches of time with nothing to do. Personally, I've never suffered from any kind of a chronic illness that would keep me down for long periods, but I can imagine that if that were to happen and I didn't have stitching to help me, I'd be in real trouble. Had to stop the video there for a second. Somebody came to the front door. Anyhow, as I was saying, the psychological, emotional aspects of working with your hands, I think, are quite invaluable. And I recently found out about a new book that I have ordered. I haven't gotten it or read it yet, but I'll do a review coming up soon. DMC has published a book written by an expert in the field who talks a little bit about the physical, psychological, emotional aspects of handwork. But I did see a small article in the Embroiderers Guild magazine recently. And one of the things that really stuck on my mind is they were interviewing the author, and she talked about having multiple projects going at the same time. Now, I know this is a debate in the stitching world. Do you finish one thing before you start another? I've always argued that I needed multiple projects going at the same time. And her research and her discussion really backed that up. The quote that was mentioned suggested that you might be looking to do something very different on a Friday evening when you've had a long, busy week and just want something to kind of relax with and not think about too much, as opposed to a project you might pick up on a leisurely Sunday afternoon when you've got quite a few hours stretching ahead of you and you really want to make something happen. In fact, she says that the optimum number of projects to have going is 10. And that if you have at least that many, then you've got options that you can pick up and lay down anytime. Now, I didn't see anything about it there, and I'm not sure that it's a discussion that she gets into in that book, but another issue for me are those projects that we started and that just keep laying around and that every once in a great while we might pick up and work on. And whether we should hold on to those things or just dump them. Obviously, you can probably guess my suggestion is that you hold on to them. But I was looking at a project recently that very much fills that gap for me. It's one that I know I started probably at least, excuse me, I gotta pick this up. I know it's one that I probably started 35 years ago. It's an old Horizons kit, and it's something that just captured my attention at the time because it's got all these wonderful birds. And it's a Longstitch piece, which means it's a version of Needlepoint where you cross over multiple lines of canvas at the same time. So this is a project that I ordered easily 35 years ago. And every great while, I'll pick it up and start working on it. It's even been around so long that some of the yarns are beginning to deteriorate a bit, and it's kind of weakened in its effect. But I can't get rid of it, and I haven't been able to give it away because I love the design. And even though it hasn't necessarily captured my attention or made its way back to the top of my to-do list, I would count it as one of those works in progress that maybe stretches back a little further than it should have. You know, another real famous one of mine that you've seen me talk about recently is this 50 states quilt that I'm working on. Now, that wasn't so much a matter of laying it aside and not wanting to work on it as it was just the sheer time that it would take to cross-stitch 50 state squares. But I will admit that I did put off actually putting it together as a quilt for probably about 10 years. So I think that in thinking about what we do and obviously wanting to sustain things and not just throw stuff away as we lose interest in it, my suggestion would be to find a corner somewhere in a back closet where it'd be safe if you have some of those projects you haven't gotten around to. And if nothing else, your heirs, when you're gone, can pick them up and decide whether they want to do something about them or not. I wouldn't throw them out. But also, I had a bit of a revelation this week when I was thinking about needlepoint, and that's one of the reasons why I pulled out this Longstitch kit that I have. I have a bunch of canvases in the shop, and you know, I try to listen to what customers tell me, and a lot of time they say that needlepoint is a little easier on their eyes, and it might be something that they'd like to work on. But even sometimes the complexity of needlework gets a little difficult. And it's also, if you do much of it with canvas, you know it's kind of hard on your wrists and the pulling mechanism that needs to be done. So when you look at a typical needlepoint canvas like this wonderful one here with the kitty cats, you can see quite a bit of complexity there and quite a bit of change. And of course, what I would say if you were getting ready to work on this is use tent stitches, which are where you cross over the corners in each area. And if possible, if you have larger areas, you'd want to use basket weave stitch to keep it from getting all wonky as you work on it. But that would be an example of a traditional needlepoint canvas that you might pick up. But Longstitch is an interesting variation of that, where, as I said, you would cross over multiple rows with the same stitch. So let me just kind of give you an example of that. This is a Longstitch kit that actually has a story to it. I bought this when I was in Jerusalem, and I'm guessing this was in probably the mid-1980s. So this one has been around quite a while. Now if you look up close, you can see those are wool needlepoint stitches, but they cross over multiple rows. And they create a quite nice effect there, especially with something like this, which is architectural and which has straight lines. This is the Dome of the Rock, which is on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And I still remember the day I got it. I was there with a tour group visiting the Middle East, and particularly the Holy Land. And we had a half a day free, and I got on a city bus and figured out where there was a needlework shop in Jerusalem. I doubt if it's still there, but I went down in a basement and there were kits everywhere, and there were people, women lined up, digging through the kits, finding things, and I bought 2 kits that day. The Dome of the Rock is one, and then I did a Jewish blessing piece that I ended up giving to somebody else. But, you know, it's just part of the adventure of going somewhere new and trying to find something. But what got me thinking again was the whole idea of Longstitch as opposed to more traditional tent stitch needlework in needlepoint. And it gives you an opportunity to pick up some pieces and maybe get them done a little more quickly if you're not the type that likes to linger over works. So I had a couple canvases here, and I was talking to a customer recently, and I really hadn't looked at them very closely, but you can see this one had already been started. And this is a beautiful piece. You could certainly do some of the smaller motifs using a more traditional tent stitch, needlepoint stitching. But certainly all that wonderful background you could do in Longstitch. and it would make it come along quite quickly. Now you could also do long stitch for the smaller designs. You would need to do some outlining there using the black, but there certainly would be a way to make that happen. So this is a fun canvas that I have that would lend itself quite well to long stitch. And if you want to look at this a little further, I'm not going to do any demos today, but if you want to look up long stitch, I'm sure there's somebody out there who has a tutorial about it as well. This is a really quite large canvas. Maybe it looks a little overwhelming when you first take a peek at it. But again, if you think about it from the standpoint of long stitch, you probably could whip this out pretty quickly if you wanted to. That's an old DMC canvas that I came upon here in the shop somehow or another. And if you like that, that would work pretty well. Now I would use traditional wools that one would use for needlepoint. My go-to is always Persian Patternayan yarns, and those of you who are used to these know that they come in strands of 3, and you typically separate the strands depending on how many you need to use, depending on how big the stitches are and how many holes per inch your canvas might have. That first piece, long stitch canvas that I showed you, the work that they've already done on it is actually using pearl cotton. But for me, that doesn't cover quite as well. And I also know that if you're going to use these for anything other than a framed piece, like a chair cushion, the yarn's going to hold up much better. I often talk about this Persian Patternayan yarn as being strong as steel. And I've seen needle-pointed chair cushions and other things that have lasted hundreds of years. Other than the fact that the wool might deteriorate or there might be insects or something like that get a hold of it. It's very, very strong and very, very lasting. So then that got me thinking about ways that one could do even larger projects that probably you would first approach just as traditional needlepoint, but then you might be able to adapt and actually get them done using long stitch. I have a bunch of these great big canvases here in the shop, and I doubt if I will ever sell them, but they certainly are marvelous. Look at this needlepoint canvas of the Last Supper. It's just a beautiful piece and wonderful colors and all the rest. Of course, there's all kinds of challenges. It looks like to me it was made in Italy. And I don't know too much other than that, except that it was in some of the things that I've bought along the way through the years. But what got me thinking about is, you see there are large sections of the same color. So you still might need to do more traditional tent stitches and things like that for the figures and the designs. But look at all that background and all that architectural work in the back that you could easily cover in long stitch. And as you see when you take a peek at that Dome of the Rock piece that I started out with, it actually covers quite nicely, and it's a good effect. There's nothing at all wrong with those stitches and the way that looks. And it would be a way to come at some of these larger projects that you might have been putting off because you're just not sure you can take the time to do it all. I don't know about you, but I pretty readily was able to find some of these large canvases here in the shop that are a little overwhelming, and that might end up just hanging there for a very long time unless we look for an innovative way to do something with them. So I would say if you've got something like that, or you find a canvas or a design that's really large and it lends itself to needlepoint using wools or cottons, then you might consider long stitch as an alternative to the more traditional tent stitch and basket weave and some of those. I was in England quite some years ago when my oldest son graduated from the master's program at York, and one of his classmates couldn't wait to introduce me to his mother because she was an avid stitcher, and this classmate of my son's knew that I was as well. And we were sitting at lunch, and we of course got into needlework and handcraft discussion immediately. And I find that needlepoint is quite popular in England, or at least was when I was there visiting. And she started asking me about what different stitches I liked. Well, I don't know if this is true for all American needlepointers, but for me, I had never even done more than tent stitch and basket weave. I didn't even think about Longstitch, which I had done sometime in the past, as a needlepoint stitch at all. So maybe we could do some exploring in this country. Maybe as needlepointers in the U.S., we could have some fun looking at the huge number of stitches that are available to us in the needlepoint realm. If you think about Bargello, another needlepoint technique where you're covering more than one row at a time and where you're doing stitching. I guess probably we would call Bargello just a form of Longstitch. But I better be careful. I might get into some territory here where I'm not the expert and give some advice that I don't need to. But if you know more about it than I do and you need to correct me, feel free to do that. So I'm going to just include a few of these canvases and a few of these examples in the pictures at the end here today so you can take a peek at them. But I guess there are two messages. Number one, it's okay to have multiple projects. What we do with our hands is actually good for us mentally, psychologically, emotionally, physically even, as we stay busy. So I certainly would advocate for that. And then I'd also advocate for pulling some of those old projects out from the past and taking a look at them, seeing if there's something that we want to get back into and maybe spend some time on. Maybe I'll keep this Longstitch bird project out and pick it up sometime. I have to go to the laundromat once a week these days since we moved into the new house. Maybe I'll take some Longstitch along with me and work on it there. Anyhow, I think that's it for today. I just had a couple random thoughts that had passed through my little pea brain throughout the week, and I wanted to share those. So I hope you're having a great June. Happy late Father's Day to all those fathers and father figures who are important parts of our lives. And I guess that's where I'll end for today. This is Gary Sly and the Legacy of Handmade Objects.
Hey.